Let's begin our discussion.
So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's both a pleasure and honor to be here today at home and talking about a theme that is so dear to me and with this great panel. Thank you all for being here and share with us your expertise and your experience, and particularly for those coming from abroad is highly appreciated. So we had the first panel was on the politician, on the political side. We are more on the stakeholder side, so we don't have political limitations with the current situation, so we can still make our speech very freely. And the novelty and uncertainty and risks of research and innovation call for test, validation, dissemination, demonstration activities, hand in hand with education and training. And these are perhaps the most relevant activities supported or developed by both research and technological infrastructures. And despite this common description, as we heard in the morning, research and technology and infrastructures, research and technology infrastructures have complementary and in some areas overlapping positioning and activities, and they are not equal. They have different objectives, different target audience, perform different set of services, needing for that different skills and resources. And this means also, of course, that the supporting policies and programs need to be different, although they should be aligned and complementary and coherent. So let's talk about this and discuss how these infrastructures and their home organizations deal with these issues like market positioning and fit, 360 degrees collaboration, because we need to collaborate, upstream, downstream, to the sides, and also governance, funding and sustainability, benefiting from your concrete examples. And this is very important that we have organizations here that can speak with experience. And so the format plan is that we start with a short introduction for each one of you. And I will start with Bertrand, if you don't mind. And I will ask you to, if possible, in your introductory speech, just to highlight this theme, which is CA has this characteristic of operating both research and technology infrastructure. So you know the difference. So how to describe them? How do we need them both? A topic that was already presented in the morning. Which are the main difference? So if you can address this topic, well, thank you very much. I would be appreciated. Thank you very much. So 3 minutes to 4 minutes introduction. Okay, thank you. Can we open the mic?
It should be better now.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank you, INESC, you, José Carlos and Ricardo, for the invitation. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here. And for my introductory remark, I would say it's true at CEA, we run both research infrastructures and technology infrastructures. So the first point would be to say that we are convinced that to be both at excellent research level in the global competition and to support industrial competitiveness, you need both, and you need experimental tools. So this is a very strong point, and it should be part of any research and innovation policy to make clear that experimental facilities are needed. We have an EU research infrastructure policy for now more than 20 years, and it's very effective. We need something of the same kind for technology infrastructures because there are some similarities, but also some differences between both objects, I would say. If we talk about the themes that you mentioned in the panel on governance and sustainability, if I start with the governance issue, what is clear is that research infrastructures are meant to develop the best knowledge production, mostly for academics, although I know there is also relations with industry, but this is the core mission of research infrastructure. When you talk about technology infrastructure, you are led to work in collaboration and for industry, so your stakeholders, your users are not exactly the same, and this has consequences in terms of governance of the infrastructure itself for TIs. Since you work with industry, you need specific, I would say, skills or capabilities in terms of IP management, liability, this type of elements, which are not so present in research infrastructure where you work with academics. And the other aspect is that the governance in terms of policy at national or EU level, of course, because technology infrastructure are meant to serve industrial competitiveness, you need to incorporate industry into your strategy, into the definition of your objectives, which is not so much the case for research infrastructure. So typically, ESFRI, which is a very efficient governance structure for research infrastructure policy between Ministry of Research, academic communities, would not be exactly replicable for TIs because you need to have somewhere the presence of industrial stakeholders. So this, I would say, is for governance. And then sustainability, very quickly. My main message here is that there it's common for RIs and TIs. When you talk about infrastructure, there is a strong focus on CapEx, the investment you need to build the infrastructure, and sometimes we tend to forget the needs in terms of OPEX, operational costs, which are very important in the long run. So any strategy for RIs and TIs should take into account these two elements, which are necessary even before you start working on it, even before you start the project. So this should be part of the reflection. And then, of course, the difference maybe is that for research infrastructure, by design, it's open very widely to academic communities on a national, transnational, European or international basis. With TIs, since you work with industry, there are some issues such as exclusivity on some specific application field. And so the way you manage your economic model can be different. I could elaborate, but I will stop here for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Anna, so your initial introduction also, if you could highlight a little bit the challenges of running a distributed network, because this is something that we are not so common. Usually think about physical infrastructures with laboratories. Now, in your case, it's a bit different. So, which are the challenges really linked to managing a European-wide distributed network? Thank you.
Thank you.
But it's not only that question, it's just a topic for your introduction.
Thank you. And I would like also to start by thanking INESC and Ricardo for inviting us here. MIRI is a distributed infrastructure, and I share a lot of the concerns that Bertrand has just shared. So I think that for distributed infrastructures, and in our case it is an infrastructure for microbial resources, the CapEx was not there. Or, I mean, there was no investment of CapEx, there was investment on OPEX, and the CapEx was put at the national level. It was pre-existing. In some cases, it is at the forefront, and that's the benefit from being a research infrastructure. Because when you are in the queue and very much behind, you will always see where you want to be in a few years. So we need to pay attention to this great heterogeneity, because we are not single-sided, and we are very diverse from member state to member state, And within each member state, there is a lot of diversity. And by the way, the microbial collections preserve biodiversity. So we could say that ultimately it is critical that every biodiversity is preserved. In terms of funding, we have 3 layers of funding that are not always there. So one that is always there is the core budget from the member states. So every member state has an annual membership contribution. Then there is this competitive funding layer where we apply for projects. And for instance, I would like to open here a parenthesis, but we had just won an Infratech. And in Infratechs, we are invited to co-develop with the industry. And we lack the skills of IP, which can be very useful. So I see here a possible engagement with TIs in the country that could perhaps support in this way. And then there should be in place as well, and it is in some countries and not in others, some continuous funding from the national nodes that would support the upgrade and the continuous development of the resource in the country. Because ultimately, we are service providers for the research community, but in a way, our partners, the culture collections from the member states, are also our users. So I would say that, summarizing and for a quick start, this is the major challenge that we are facing.
Thank you very much. So Ana Teresa, now back to you for your introduction. In your case, I'm particularly interested to understand the challenges of an infrastructure that deals mainly with information, data, knowledge. So it's not so much with products, physical products, it's knowledge. Of course, there is a huge amount of challenges from privacy to cybersecurity. So which are the characteristics that such an infrastructure has that is a little bit more special than or different from the other ones?
Okay, so good morning. The first thing is to make people understand that data is an infrastructure, not only roads and bridges.
Yeah, exactly.
So sometimes it's difficult to understand that the infrastructure to store and to make data available to others is really a huge infrastructure that needs resources and that needs a strategy for sustainability. Perhaps I will put here my hat of as a head of node of the Elixir Portugal. So I also represent in the country the Elixir Portugal, that is one of the nodes of an infrastructure, an European infrastructure that is Elixir, that deals with life and health data. Okay, and as Anna was saying, because Anna was involved many years ago in this node, so at European level, we have this countries fund that will support some operation of these infrastructures, but then this goes to the national level. And at the national level, we don't have that support. So this makes things a bit strange because we have a support from the country to the European level, but then at the national level, we don't have that support. So we need to replicate the model that we have at European level. So inside Portugal, we are also a distributed infrastructure. Okay, so we have partners from all over the country. And of course, we also have fees from the partners to support the basic operation of the node. But then we need to think that we are working for the country. So we need to build, in the case of Elixir, we are building the infrastructures to deal with, for example, health-sensitive data, okay? And if we don't have a policy in the country that really helps these infrastructures to think what is to build a data infrastructure for example, sensitive data, that will support all the research in the country, it's not a node like this one that will be able to move forward and to push things forward. And this is what we see, not only in Portugal, but in many other countries in Europe. On other countries, it's not like this. It's not like this in France. It's not like this in Finland, Norway, Denmark. So that the countries decided to have institutions that are there not only to provide the computational resources, but to provide the human resources to deal with the data, to store the databases, to annotate the databases, to make the databases available. So what we are having now in Portugal, and let me tell you, this is, I think it's a nice example. There is a, sorry.
It's okay.
There is an initiative that is the 1 Million Genome Initiative. So it's an European initiative to build, the huge database with 1 million genomes from Europeans. And each country will contribute with a part. And of course, we have funding from Europe, but that funding is just supported in 50% because it's ESFRI fund. So in the country needs to put the other part. We have that part in Portugal? No, we don't. So we try with the partners, with the institutes like INESC and other institutes to also apply to European projects, to apply to partners' fees, to try to get that fund, 50% fund, to build the pipeline, the software pipeline that will deal with the data. But now, this is for the country. So where should we put this database? And now I'm knocking. FCCN, FCT, can you keep me there, the sensitive human data? No, I can't. So I go to INSA. Okay, you will have the sequencing machines. Can you hold this? No, I can't. Can I go to the universities? They say, no, we are not responsible for sensitive data. So what's going on? We need in the country a strategy to deal with the research data for all the institutes, for all the projects, not only data that comes from normal projects. And we see this happening in other countries in Europe. So we have the skills, so we have people that knows how to set up the pipelines, we have the human resources, and we don't have a strategy. And this is bad.
Yeah. Thank you. Very, very clear message, that one. Fernando, you are a person from industry, actually from an SME, which are, say, supposedly the main beneficiaries and the most needed beneficiaries of technological infrastructures mainly, but you're also an experienced guy of working with interface organizations, RTOs, technology centers. So in your introductory speech, from the industry, and particularly from SME side, which are the most relevant functions, activities? What do you need mainly from research and mainly from technology and infrastructures, I will assume, but it's up to you to decide that.
Well, first of all, thanks for INESC Tech and Ricardo and Caldeira for the invitation. So we are a SME, we basically manufacture technological advanced equipments. But being a SME, we don't have internally the resources that we need and the knowledge that we need to address all the challenges that we face. So that is the main topic, the main thing that we ask, and we have been collaborating with R&D entities for many, many years, okay? INESC Tech, for instance, but also other kinds of entities like INESG, and the ones that are more close to the market, which are the technological centers of normally by each sector. Okay, but so before right now I believe that I should start with one of the first topics that Portuguese recommendations on FP10 made was the same approach leads to the same results. And I believe that what we have been doing, and it has been very good, okay? It is probably not at all accomplishing what we need to do according with, for instance, the Draghi report, okay? Since the Draghi report was made, a lot of things have changed. We see that changing every year, every day, every week, right now, in fact, okay? So basically, we need to change the way that things are doing, okay? And having said that, this means creating impact. We as SMEs, we must grow. Okay, there are lots of ways to do that, and obviously we need EGTIs to help us on doing it through the knowledge. Okay, but on the other hand, and this was already addressed on the last panel. Okay, the EGTIs itself, mainly in Portugal, they also need to grow. They also need to acquire scale. That is a topic that we should also address in Portugal for sure, okay? Because right now, we just have too many contact points. For a SME like us, fortunately, we have been working with the right partners for many decades, but for I cannot even imagine what will be to put my feet on one guy, one entrepreneur that is now starting, and okay, what is my contact point? Where should I go to if I need this kind of knowledge? Okay, so one idea is the clusters. Okay, that is something that is working. Some of them, at least. Some others probably should get the right evaluation. Okay, digital innovation hubs. They've already been addressed also in the last panel. Okay, that was a topic to try to solve it. Probably not yet working at all, but okay, that is also one way of putting the EGTIs working together. But I believe that topics are scale, and then obviously for that we need collaboration.
Thank you very much. So let's now, after this introductory round, let's try to focus a bit on two topics that were mainly. So which one? I will link some of them: collaboration and governance, because I really believe that this need to collaborate 360 degrees around this infrastructure is really a challenge, and this is strongly linked to the governments also, to the governance models, and then let's try to make a first round on this, and then a second round more looking to the funding challenge, because as we've seen, this is also an important issue. So regarding collaboration, it's not only around, as I said, it's not only around between, in the same layer, between research infrastructures or between technology infrastructures. It's also the collaboration between research infrastructures and technology infrastructures, between technology infrastructures and the industries and sectors. So in this panorama, how do you think we can make these links more efficient and effective? Because if something is clear for us today is that we need speed. Well, we need speed and we need to be efficient, of course, effective, so we need to really transfer and get, but the speeding up of the innovation cycle, let's put it like this, puts a lot of pressure or additional pressure on these interfaces between these let's put it, these three levels. And of course, this has very much to do with the governance, how we organize these kind of interactions. And so I would like you to make a first round on, again, from your experience, from your cases, how do you think this collaboration can be improved? You know, I spoke with several people in this expert group, and you know, we are saying, you know, sometimes we forget that the main customers of research infrastructures are not sometimes the companies or industries, it's actually the technology infrastructures. And sometimes we are linked and we try to forget this connection. So how can we improve this flow of knowledge and people, by the way, between these different levels, and how the governance models, the way we organize ourselves, how we get in touch between ourselves can help or can hamper this, okay? So, Ana Teresa, can you start now? I will go this way.
As you said at the beginning, we don't need to be politically correct.
No.
Yeah. So, that's good. So I think the first thing that we need to do is to stop inventing new designations and new things. So we have research institutes, we have universities, we have research infrastructures, we have technology infrastructures, we have clusters, we have collabs, we have digital innovation hubs. So now we will going to have EGTIs. So someone please stop inventing things. Let's just for us to start to understand how we can collaborate. So the first thing that is very important for me that represent a research infrastructure is that for our associates that are the universities and the research institutes, understand that this is a way for them to collaborate not only between each other, but with other institutes in Europe. And this is our main focus now at Elixir Portugal, is to bring collaborations between all the institutes in Portugal and other institutes at the European level. Now, if you ask me, now we go to the more technology transfer, when the groups are developing a project and they want to interact with a company. Research infrastructures, they want to interact with the company. Then technology infrastructures, they want to interact with the company. Then clusters, they want to interact with the company. So everybody wants to do everything, okay? So, and this fragments the ecosystem, and we just lose the resources and the energy. So I think it's time for us to just design the architecture of all this big system and to try to make people understand the flows of the communication. If you need that, you should contact that person. As you were saying, at some point we don't know which person we should contact. Okay, and then all the mechanisms are appearing, and another. Okay, this is a message perhaps for Portugal. If we are surviving, we cannot dream, and we are always surviving. So sometimes it's difficult to approach other infrastructures, other things, because in the daily basis we are just surviving, and the energy goes all on that thing. So once again, we need some basic level for people to have time to think and to communicate. But what we are doing at Elixir Portugal at this stage is to make the universities and the research centers to communicate, to connect, to participate in projects with other research infrastructures. Now we are participating in a project with MIRI, okay? It will be impossible if Anna was not a previous manager of Elixir Portugal. So, but this is how we are working now.
So are you saying that we should try to segment the interventions between the different type of infrastructures?
I think so. It's like the same thing in Portugal, that like these regions that we have, that everybody needs to be specialized in everything. Okay, so you need to split the money around the country. This is quite difficult for an infrastructure that is a distributed infrastructure. How should I apply as Elixir to national funding if I have the fund on the regional, in the regions? And I have one partner from one region that is supporting in 80%, one partner for another region that is supporting in 40%. How do we manage an infrastructure like that? It's impossible. Okay.
Thank you, Anna. Ana Teresa, you have Anna, you have an extra layer of interaction with your European-wide network.
So I would say that we need to start by improving our communication. I would say we have 3 things where we need to excel to overcome these barriers. We need to be visible, we need to facilitate access, and we need to create impact. And without clear communication amongst us, but also to the users, with the stakeholders, with the funding, with the policymakers, and I think huge steps are being taken. They are not just yet enough. So regarding the problematic that Ana Teresa mentioned, I'm not sure I'm in favor of segmentation. This is not for me the point. The point is the knowledge of the workflow of the players. It was great to hear Dominik earlier defining clearly what is what, because sometimes we don't know. And if we know what is what, then we can understand, because I'm personally against silos. I like the flows between what is different. But I believe that for us within the ecosystem, it is already difficult to understand who is who and doing what. And for the users, it is even more difficult. So all infrastructures need to work on their communication better. I think that who runs the policy, the European scientific and innovation strategy, needs to be more clear and support us in our communication. And that we need to work on our visibility better in a more professional way, but we also need to facilitate the access so that everyone can know that, well, if you need microbial resources, go to MIRI, irrespectively if you are from the industry or whatever, because if we cannot solve your problem, I will know that there is a technological infrastructure that can do it. So I think that the workflow of information needs to be there and is not clear at the moment, particularly because there is always something new being created, but also because the strategy is not clear even for us.
Thank you very much. Bertrand, just before I give you the floor, I was just looking at Dominik because, in this task group, expert group that we are in Brussels, these discussions are very interesting. And the fact that we end up agreeing that we have 3 types of infrastructures, and that's it. And all the other types fit into these 3 groups. I think it was a major achievement of that expert group because, the tendency was to start making a very long list of different types of infrastructure. And this only leads to confusion. It really leads to confusion. Bertrand, like in EGTIs, I mentioned before, we also operate research infrastructures and technology infrastructures. And even internally, sometimes we have some difficulties to make these connections, these collaborations. I imagine that maybe you have also, but you have also the connections outside of CEA. So how do you see this collaboration now? How the government model can help on this?
Yeah. Well, I would say that we consider that research and technology infrastructures are drivers of ecosystem, basically. When you have a good infrastructure, be it research or technology, you attract not only a research community, but also companies to work with you, and often they locate their R&D labs around infrastructure to get easier access. This is where you can create or support startups. And so this is the virtuous dimension of research and technology infrastructure. But the point is that they are usually very local, sometimes national, but very local. And it's a good thing in a way, but our problem is that we cannot afford to recreate in each region of Europe a strong ecosystem on all strategic technologies. So we need to have an approach that makes us more efficient in the way we allocate the resources. And so we need to make this ecosystem more transnational at EU level. So the question is, how do we do this? How do we make sure that SME in Portugal knows and have access to an infrastructure in Finland, for example? This creates a question on access condition, of course, but I would say also the first step would be to make sure that there is a common vision of sectors or communities on what is already available in Europe and what are the gaps. So this idea, which was discussed earlier in the previous session, of organizing mapping of facilities or schemes or infrastructure is very important, and of course it can be done only efficiently at European level. We need to organize private and public stakeholder communities and ask them 2 things basically. What is your collective vision of the research roadmap needed to be competitive in hydrogen, in AI or whatever? Once they have agreed on that, we should ask them a second element to reach this objective. What are the infrastructures you need? What are those who are already available in Europe and where? And what are those which are missing? And once you have that, you can create some instruments to facilitate access from one country to another. Of course, the EU program is instrumental in that. There have been tentative or instruments already created. You can discuss their efficiency, their complexity, but I mean, it's the right move forward. But before putting instruments, we could start by having a clear vision of what is available. I think in the report of the expert group, that was quite a strong result of the survey to users, is the lack of visibility of what service can be offered by what infrastructure. So let's start by doing this, and I think the rest will come quite naturally. I'm not saying it will be easy, but if we don't do that as a start, we will have difficulties being efficient in the instruments.
Thank you very much. Fernando, You already mentioned, you already mentioned this difficulty of visibility, for an SME, it's, try to navigate only in the national landscape. It's already a big challenge. Now, if you consider that you should also see and use the ones that are abroad, it will be an increasing issue. So I ask your opinion on how do you see this possibility? The idea we have is particularly for technological infrastructures. Their intervention when it comes to SMEs is rather limited. So which means usually an SME goes to the infrastructures that are nearby. I don't know if it's 100 kilometers or 150 or 50, depends also on the highways, transportation, because these are real facts of life. No, I don't think we have, I think there are statistics on the research infrastructure. We don't have statistics at European level that we can say, which is the distance of most of the customers of that infrastructure. But I suspect that if we do it, it will be rather limited, okay? For practical reasons from the company side, I will go also for the funding reasons, but I'll leave that to the second round. So, but from an SME, first, how do you see this possibility of collaboration if possible, if there is the visibility for many of these services that companies need to go abroad? And also, how do you think that companies, either individually or organizing in clusters or in associations like it was in many cases in Portugal, can actually have a word on saying on the strategy, on the priorities that these infrastructures are developing for them? Because we know that in many cases when the funding comes only from the public side and there is not such an interactions, we know from the past that sometimes the end result of the infrastructure, then the services and the knowledge is not fit to what really industry needs. So how can industry help to shape, the funding comes later, to shape, and how can industry collaborate with these infrastructures, knowing that in some cases there may be competing companies there. So let's not forget also that from the practical point of view. But how can industry help to shape how these infrastructures perform in the market?
Okay. Well, you made two questions. Okay, let me start with the first one because it has been addressed with Bertrand and also Elena. First of all, is the mapping of the expertises of everybody that is on board, in this case in Europe, for sure. One of the things that we should more and more get careful about is what kind of partnerships we make. So it means nowadays it seems that is in Europe. Okay, more and more we should consider Europe. Okay, and that is a key point. So where are the expertise? Okay, then obviously all these entities need communication, like Anna stressed out. Okay, SMEs are not the strongest in communication, but we must admit that majority of EGTIs are not as well, basically because it's normally they communicate for the funds, so it's for the incentives that they have to communicate. It's basically human nature, okay? So we need to put the industry on top of their communication priorities, otherwise we will never achieve, and this comes to the second question, which is how do we put the industry or the economy overall, because it's not only the industry, it's also services, okay, on the board, on this on the priorities that EGTIs define themselves. Obviously, there are a lot of ways of doing that. For instance, just here in the University of Porto, we have several governance models, okay? So I will not defend one against the others, but it's somehow the industry, or I mean the economy, must be on the board. Otherwise, there is no point. Obviously, that creates a lot of bureaucratic issues. Another way is to put these entities working together with the economy on clusters or on the associations, and that way they will also feel, okay, what are the requests? My main concern here and right now is we must achieve impact and we must do it fast, because our challenges are moving every day, okay, and we are changing every day. And let's face it, Europe is not is not so well fast in taking decisions. So that is our biggest challenge: how to do it fast.
Well, thank you very much. So now let's talk a little bit about funding, the interesting one. So we heard about that, infrastructures have different types of funding needs. So CapEx, when they are created, CapEx also when they need to be updated, because let's not forget that after creation and after some times of operations, if we are talking about technological infrastructures, we need to update them. Not only the infrastructure itself, but also the competence, in many cases, the competence of the persons that are operating the infrastructure. And with the speeding up of the technological development, this need is becoming more and more frequent, and the investments are getting more and more bigger and bigger. So we have the CapEx for the creation, but also the CapEx for the update. Then we have the OpEx for the operation, the base operation of keeping let's say, the team, the basic functionalities, and then we have the funding for the activities, either projects, contracts, whatever. So we have this, you can add more if it's the case. Then we have different funding sources. So we have funding sources that can be public, more from the science part, more from the economic part, let's say public, or national, regional, European. We also have the funding from the companies, from the industry, from the economy, which is, of course, very, very important, mainly for the technological infrastructures. And then now we have this view on European, national, and regional level. So now the third dimension is precisely in this landscape of activities and fundings, what makes sense that is funded at European level, what makes sense that is funded at, for example, interregional level, and what makes sense that is funded at national, regional level. So this is a kind of sophisticated framework also that we have to navigate in our days. And it's getting, again, more and more complex. On a certain way, I think that's a positive thing, because this will help us to have this more integrated, this allow us to be able to have this more integrated and coherent vision on infrastructures. But of course, it's a big challenge. And we just have to remember again what happened with digital innovation hubs and how theoretically good idea had a terrible implementation, not only at national level, but also at the problem started at European level. Let's not forget about that. So we have to be careful, because this is sophisticated from the political point of view and from the theoretical point of view. It sounds nice, very nice, and even not very complicated. But we know that when it comes to the implementation, there are big challenges. So just 2 or 3 questions, then you can open others. Is what in this part, what makes sense that is funded at European, at national, regional level? What it makes sense that is funded more from the private side, more from the public side, considering what we mentioned before, and how you see from your experience, if you have some good examples on, for example, how we try to combine different funding sources to your let's say, to your needs. Anna, can we start now with you?
Yes, thank you. So at the European level, one of the things that should be supported is the networking and the collective upgrade of the state of the art. So that I was reading in one of the presentations, I think it was Ellen's, but I'm not sure, that the Draghi report mentioned that not every member state would have the critical mass to have adequate resources at a certain level. So I think that this bringing all the member states interested in achieving that for their national communities, I think that should be supported at the European level, because in the end, everyone will benefit from there. Another thing that I would like to bring, and I think it is at the level of the European funding. I'm sure that most of you are acquainted with the European Open Science Cloud that everyone is now working on. It is more related to data. But giving all this ecosystem and the need for some specialization, not isolation, but some specialization. Perhaps the interplay of these different actors could continue to be fostered and supported by the Commission. I'm thinking that, for instance, InfraServes and InfraTechs, one that is to facilitate the access to services provided by different infrastructures, and the other that fosters co-development from the infrastructures and with the industry to the development of new services and products. I think that this could be an instrument, or this instrument could be upgraded to engage research infrastructures with technological infrastructures and eventually other system players that are not at the moment working together, so that they together learn how to deliver and a workflow is designed. But then also after this, I think that at the European level it is important that some sustainability of the services that prove needed, because the needs assessment is important, and this afternoon's session could not be more opportune, that these services keep being provided, and that the collaborations established between the different actors for that purpose, and I mean the different infrastructures in particular, that these stay available until an assessment that would drive us in another direction, because, as was being said by Fernando, the landscape is changing all the time, but perhaps 1 or 2 years it should stand for that thing. So I think that all of this, that in a way is to provide instruments to support what is being strategically designed at an upper level.
Thank you. Anna, Teresa, perhaps now.
Okay, so in the case of our data infrastructure, I think it's very relevant that all the services that are there and they contribute or they support the research at European level, they should have the support from European funding, because it's something that is impacting all the research all over Europe. And that's what we see in many resources in life and health, so that we have European funding that supports the development of those resources. But as a data, I will bring this for the data infrastructure, it is very difficult for us when we see that the funding oblige us or makes it mandatory for us, for example, to acquire equipment. Why a data infrastructure should acquire a computational infrastructure if there are many computational infrastructures that we can partner with? So if the funding comes with this obligation that we partner with other infrastructures and that facilitates this speciality, so if our data infrastructure can collaborate or receive funding to collaborate with a computational infrastructure that will define the infrastructure for our specific needs, that will help a lot. And that's what we are not seeing, because at the national level, all the infrastructures are supported with the same mindset. And it is quite difficult for a data infrastructure that needs more human resources than computational infrastructure, okay? But when the services are to be provided for at European level or at world level, I think we need the support for the European countries and from the European projects.
Bertrand?
Yeah, so the funding, of course, is a very important and complex question, so there are many things to say. I would like to address 2 topics you mentioned. What distribution between public and private, and what distribution between EU, national, and regional. So on public and private, there is a very simple possibility, which is the private sector, a private company, decides to have its own infrastructure, research or technology, and so they do it by themselves and there's no problem. It's quite unlikely. What we hear basically in general is that because these objects are very expensive, it's even for a large company, it's difficult to to make a business case for investing in such tools, not to mention SMEs or startups. So it makes sense. There is a case for the public sector to support and also to own research or technology infrastructure, and in particular for technology infrastructure, then to provide service to the industry. Then what should be supported by the public sector? There can be a debate on whether it's only CapEx or also OpEx. Our view as a RTO is that you need both CapEx and OpEx public support, because otherwise there is no economic model for a technology infrastructure to be viable. If you only rely on the revenues that you get from the industry, usually it doesn't work, or unless you become a commercial service provider, which is not exactly the same as a technology infrastructure. And you also get into state aid problem, etc. So our view is that you need both. You need public support both for investment and operation. Then on the question of the distribution between EU, national and regional level, well, I think there are some, as has been said already, obvious reasons for the EU to intervene when we talk about giving transnational access to some infrastructures. And we have a lot to learn here from research infrastructure policy over the last 20 years. It's the same for creating network or integration of infrastructure, like in some case it becomes distributed infrastructure across Europe. So here I don't think there is much difference in principle between RIs and TIs. Maybe on the modalities a little bit. But then our view is also that we also need, which was not the case for research infrastructure, an EU investment in CapEx for technology infrastructure. For research infrastructure, I think historically the reason is that member states didn't want, by asking money from the EU, to give decision power to the EU. And it has been working like this for the last 20 years. We think, I mean, as RTO, as CEA, that on technology infrastructure, we are not in a position anymore to deny the contribution that the EU level can make, because once again, nobody will be able to afford all the investment needed in all the strategic sectors. So we need the EU to help us invest, and we have some already successful cases, I must say, on high-performance computing, EuroHPC. The new machines are owned by the joint undertaking, so by the EU. On the CHIPS Act, the pilot lines have been co-funded by the EU, and this has allowed us to acquire the top-level equipment and facilities to stay in the race, the technological race in these fields. But of course, this comes with some conditions and counterparts, because if the EU pays, they want that access is given on a European basis. And for RIs, it's done almost by design. For TIs, it's probably something new we need to invent. In the case of microelectronics, my colleague here, David, could say a lot more than myself, but we have been working over the last 1 or 2 years to organize this wider access to transnational communities to the microelectronic pilot lines at CEA. So basically, it's possible.
Yeah, thank you. Just one complementary question that you may intervene if you want also. I think that what we are looking at and what we hear is again this kind of co-funding mechanism, so which means it's still in CapEx. It's still a major effort from the member states, but the Commission is willing or could be, like in projects, to make a top-up on that investment, as long the member states align these investments with the European priorities. Well, I think it's a, let's say, it's a reasonable mechanism. I think it's my personal opinion. But then this calls for the possibility that we operationalize this with the funding instruments. And and this is not only for the CAPEX, but also for the access. For example, today, if you go to regional instruments that support SMEs on their projects, and you say, I want to use an infrastructure that is in another country, it's not eligible. And this is not only, by the way, it was a big surprise for me, but this is not only true for the structural funds that in Portugal are very important, because it's outside of the region, but even rich regions that operate with their own budget, they have this in their rules. So which means even it's not a limitation from the structural funds only, it's also a mentality limitation. They say it's our money, so it's to be spent in the region. So if we move towards a model like this, we need to push this forward with a significant transformation, not only in the regulations, the rules and regulations of the funding instruments, but also in the mentalities of people. And not only the companies or the SMEs, because probably those are the ones easier to convince if they see an advantage. It's also from the public instruments that we need to change. Because again, otherwise we'll end up with problems like we have in the digital innovation apps. I just have another issue, which is, if we do it like this, are we still able to keep it, let's say, fair for all the countries and the regions that are willing to invest? Because if they are not willing, they don't invest. Or countries with more limitations will always have a problem to enter in these networks. If this is a decision done mainly at European level and for a limited number of sectors like we hear today.
I don't want to monopolize.
No, but go ahead.
Well, of course, I fully agree that, first of all, this system works if when there is EU decision or priorities for investment, first, you need alignment of national programs, which is not done by definition. And actually, historically, I think also in the research infrastructure, the fact that there is an EU policy being set up early 20s created an obligation for national governments to have their national policies on research infrastructure, which were not necessarily so strongly organized as they are today. So we might end up with having this process for TIs. Fully agree that if we go into this direction, there will be a change of mind necessary at regional, national level, but also with EU instrument, because in some cases, access to infrastructure funded by the EU require that the user comes from another country than the infrastructure. So if you are a French SME wanting to access a French infrastructure, you're not allowed to use EU money, which is not, I mean, if you think through, why not? You see? And then on the question of who will be able to afford that because of disparities of region, I think there we come back to this idea of smart specialization. Not everybody, once again, will be able to pay for everything. It's not about poorest or richest region. No region, even the richest, will not be able to afford all infrastructure and all access to everything. So each one of us should be having a strategy at government level, regional or national, on which topics, technologies, segment of industrial sector we want to put our money. And I think it's a good thing. We need to go through this process because, once again, we cannot stay in the same situation of fragmentation between 27 member states and I don't know how many dozens of regions.
Thank you. I will come back to you if you want to comment also on this. But Fernando, again, from the industry side, how do you see that industry can fund and contribute to the funding of this system. And with that, somehow also make sure that what is done is relevant for industry. So which type of functions, which type of activities you see that are activities that can be funded by industry?
Okay, so first of all, if the mission of each entity is well defined, obviously the entities, the companies, the private sector will immediately see what are the advantages in going to the services that these entities are providing. So it means that the funding, at least part of it, probably 1/3, whatever, okay, should came always from direct services, competitive service, okay. Another part, obviously, I completely agree, either from European, either from national funds, for the part that obviously is not sustainable in terms of economically, okay. But one way of doing this is probably, for instance, pilot lines, which is one of the topics that is always on top of the table, being implemented as close to the companies or even inside the companies as possible in order to assure that they will be used every hour or of every day. And this way, if they are giving a good service, obviously it will be the private sector to do the upgrades and assure that these things will always be upgraded. Okay, that's one easy way of doing it. United States do it quite often in a lot of laboratories. Okay, but it's when we are speaking about funds, we must also speak about efficiency. And efficiency means that it's not only changing mentality, as you have stressed, but it's also changing a lot of things. And one of the topics is for sure, at least in European level, but also in national funds, the bureaucracy. Okay, if we stop losing so much time on bureaucracy and we really start evaluating the things on the impact that they have, we will certainly have a lot of funds that will be released.
Good point. Both of you, do you want to add something on this discussion?
Yeah, just to add something regarding, again, from the point of view of a data infrastructure. From a data infrastructure, the regional funding or regional restriction doesn't make any sense. So what are we going to develop to be used just in Porto or Lisbon or Coimbra? This is data. So it's national data, should be funded by national funding. When it comes to the European level, things became a little bit more tricky because data sometimes is very relevant for the country and it can be used for political negotiation. So that aspect becomes more tricky. But that doesn't mean that the researchers should not be allowed to use other computational infrastructure to process the data if the infrastructures are not available in the country. But from the data point of view, I think now we are facing in Portugal a very difficult situation because the way the research infrastructures are being funded doesn't make any sense for data.
Can I add something on you?
Well, just stress what my colleagues just mentioned. That we need this strategy to be more fluid and to have these different components, and that these need alignment so that we all can together produce more impact. Because in fact the fragmentation leads to the misuse of resources. And I think we all are willing to do better with the scarce resources we have. I would just like to make a final point. We are talking a lot about data, and data is extremely important. But we need, and I think it is a challenge for Europe that sometimes stops investing in certain areas. We need to continue to produce data. So that kind of effort still needs to be funded.
Well, thank you very much. So we started with half an hour delay. I want to end up with half an hour delay. So I'll just make a short sum up of what at least my vision of some key messages that we have here. So it's clear that we need a kind of global model of this landscape, that we understand what the different organizations are, what they do and what they don't do also, because it's also very important. But we need to have this model that will allow us a clarification and somehow to clarify the segmentation of roles, meaning that is not a barrier, it's not stopping from, but it's clear that which are the main activities of each one of these infrastructures and what are the characteristics they need to have to be able to call themselves a research infrastructure or a technological infrastructure. And by doing that, identifying the collaboration needs and links between them so that we can look to the system and understand, well, this is what we need to do, but these ones are mainly located here, but then we need to make sure that the connections work so that we really have an ecosystem and not a group of entities working in parallel. And to allow that, and to promote and to incentivize that, we need also a coherent funding model. And what we are here today, more and more, this is a model that needs to consider the different types of investment. We talk CapEx, OpEx, projects, contracts, whatever, but also to make it, to understand that the different levels of funding, so the European, the national, regional. Of course, this is not easy to do. I think the expert group was a very important step, the work and the recommendations, a very important step, and I hope, really hope, that the countries do also their homework and understand the importance, and this is a message particularly for Portugal, because allow me to do that because we are here, that they need to actively engage in these discussions and participate actively. And so by doing that, knowing when they come home, what they need to do at national and regional level for these things to happen, because otherwise their stakeholders may be left out of this transformation process. And from the European side, allow me also to say that, you know, we need to understand if from the European side we understand and we want, and we say this needs to be involved with the member states, and this needs to be involved with countries and regions. We need complementary funding from countries or regions. They have to talk with the countries and the regions, because I've seen in the past sentences like this and decisions made at European level without any involvement from the region side. So when then it was supposed the regions to step up, no one knew about anything. They was not prepared. They didn't agree. So we really need to have a much more broad discussion and involvement of stakeholders. I know it's difficult. I know it will take time. It will not be ready at the first time. It will take time, but I think it's an effort that we all together need to do to the benefit of all of us. So again, thank you very much for this panel. I think it was a very fruitful discussion. Thank you for listening to us, and I hope we all take let's say, good ideas and especially actions to do in the future. And in the afternoon, then we will be able to go more in detail on some of these topics and come up with some, I hope, some not only problems and needs and challenges, but so with some interesting ideas and solutions on how to do it in the future. Thank you very much, and I hope that the Vozov is going to tell us what we are going to do next.
Thank you to our panel of experts for the valuable takeaways that we will surely contribute to this afternoon's workshop. We kindly ask you to return to your seats in the front rows as we prepare to close the first half of today's event.
So I just want to say something logistical about the afternoon. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you so much to all of you for being here. It's quite a heavy light. Thank you so much for all of you for being here. It's been a very, very, very fantastic morning of discussion with very knowledgeable people. I think we all learned, even if we are here for many, many years, working in these issues. So in the afternoon, as José Carlos said, we'll go into the nitty-gritty. We'll go into the details of the needs assessment of the research and the technology infrastructures. This will take place on the 3rd floor of this building, and we will indicate how to get there. But before that, you must be hungry. So there's some lunch outside, again, but outside inside a tent, quite a big tent. And I trust that will be good. So just like to invite you to have lunch, and then go in the afternoon for that meeting. But before we leave, I just like to take this opportunity, because I won't have another one, to thank everyone who collaborated with me in the organization of this. First of all, my colleagues Andrea and Vera and Marta, who were instrumental in making this happen, and that is very, very important. Without them, this would not have taken place at all. Also, the colleagues from the communication service, who are making a huge effort for communicating this effectively, and all the other people that have helped, including people at higher hierarchical levels than me, because we only do what we're allowed to do. So thank you so much, and enjoy the lunch, and I really hope to see you this afternoon.
Thank you, Ricardo Miguel. Once again, we extend our gratitude to our esteemed speakers and moderators for their insightful contribution, and to all of you who joined us at FIUP this morning for such an engaging discussion. We will now take a break for a networking lunch, a great opportunity to continue conversations in a more informal setting. The program will resume at 2:30 p.m. on the third floor with the Needs Assessment Workshop held in partnership with the RITIFI project. Thank you.